And happy Monday, beautiful humans. Welcome to Embodied Impact. Today we have with us Anna Freeman. Welcome, Anna.
Thank you, Tobias.
And we'll unpack the emotional intelligence of money fitness today. So when I first met Anna, it was at a roundtable of great British entrepreneurs. And when I heard Anna talk about combining the world of what I feel much kind of personal development, sort of emotional intelligence within the world of money and business, it really struck a beautiful chord with me. And so give you a bit of a background about Anna. So Anna has had a successful career in the FinTech space and identified that a healthy money mindset is a crucial dimension of health. And so this observation made her follow her own personal journey in well-being and really figured out that in fact, money is the number one cause of mental health problems around the world. And interestingly, it's consistently overlooked. So today, Anna, what I want to discover with you is what was really your journey into this space? And so if any of you who are tuning in and listening, if you have questions coming up throughout the conversation, put them in the chat or put them in the question box and we'll get to them and have Anna answer as many questions as personally as you ask them to really allow you to receive lots of value from that conversation. Over to you, Anna.
No, it's a great place to start. It's where I always like to start the conversations because it just makes so much more sense. Money as a topic for most of us comes with a huge amount of baggage and a huge amount of preconceptions as well. So I have always worked in startup businesses, very fortunate to work in some successful, what we call in finance, FinTech businesses. Wasn't really called that when I started in it. But being in that industry, really, I was in a commercial role and always kind of involved in conferences, if you like, where we were talking about the future and talking about innovation and stuff like that. And we very rarely talked about customers. So I'm, as a person, I'm people through and through. I'm high on empathy. And that for me was a bit of a kind of a mismatch. I went through my own journey to well-being in around 2011. And I had recognized at this time that as an industry, we needed to do things differently to engage people with money in a different way. I didn't really know it, but at the same time, when I was going through my own journey, I started to think about things in a different way. We had a huge, most of my career was in London, and there was a culture in London of, drinking, the culture of drinking in London, which was, I stood in the street and just thought, why is there nothing else on offer for people to relax when we're all working so hard? It's the only way for people to really have some downtime. For me, that wasn't working anymore, and I needed something else. And I thought at that time, I want to build that something else for people. And for myself, I sat down and I thought, what were the things that really made me happy? Because I was having a successful career, but I wasn't happy. And I knew, I was very fortunate to know for myself, I could think back, actually from my childhood, I could think back, what were the things that really lit me up and made me happy? I'd competed at sport at a young age, at a highly competitive level, and I loved winning and I loved competing. And I'd always talked about mastering a new sport, but talked about it and not done it. So I thought, that I need to do. And I'd always been a singer as well. I sang for 20 years in a choir, and I'd since left that choir and decided, okay, I need to pick up singing again and do something with that. So long story short, I started putting my time and my resources into the things that I knew would make me, or that I'd hoped would make me start to feel happier. And instantaneously they did. So probably a few months into this journey, walking along the road, I was thinking, I've stopped worrying about spending my money on anything else, because these are the things that are really bringing me joy and bringing me happiness. Why don't we all think about money in this way? Why don't we think, what are the things that ultimately make me feel good? And therefore, those are the things that I should prioritize as my spend. So that was the start of my journey, was identifying for my own self what things I knew I needed to do to try and improve my health and well-being. And I hugely overnight improved how I was feeling. It got me through a very difficult time and then set me on this journey that I've been on ever since, which was to try and help people see that money was part of their health. So I saw, I'd gone through this journey my own self and became hugely interested in health and well-being, and recognized that we research lots of people, and if you talk about well-being, what well-being means for people, they'll tell you lots of different things, but nobody mentions money. Nobody thinks about money as part of their health. But then if I say anything to do with, money is a source, they're like, most people would say, yes, that's my greatest source of stress. And all the research shows us that that is the leading cause of people's mental health problems. So we've got a number of issues. Firstly, that nobody recognizes it as part of holistic well-being. So you've got lots of holistic well-being tools were coming out, looking at diet, sleep, and exercise and all these things, but none of them included money. So I started talking with the health industry, and the health industry has been very nervous of it as well, because they've seen it as this industry that's really highly regulated and I guess untouchable in some ways. But so they didn't want to see it as part of their own remit. So that is where I decided we need to do something about this. We need to help people understand, firstly, that money is integrated into health, and it does impact your health. An analogy I like to use is a bridge, and if you've got lots of bricks in your bridge, the central one is often money, because money impacts all the other areas of well-being, whether that's your nutrition, your physical fitness. Lots of people say there's all sorts of things that really govern how people spend. It's generally two different areas. Is there inner intrinsic motivators, so they're kind of core beliefs, and then externally what people would see as acceptable, I guess, from a social perspective, social and a cultural perspective. And socially and culturally in London, where I was brought up, it was acceptable to just, regardless of your income level, to spend your money in a certain way. And I think that's the same for many people now. We're pulled in a direction all the time of how to spend our money, the best ways to spend our money. And I believe actually that it's very unique how we should spend, because our research has also taught us that everybody's well-being is completely unique, and the way that people spend their money is also completely unique. So I don't think it's right for us as individuals and for anyone to judge what is good and what is bad. You need to understand for your own selves, first of all, where your well-being is at. And if you are, there's all these different core elements of well-being, which Tobias, you'll be very familiar with, whether that's environmental, social, physical, the kind of standard ones, social, physical, mental, and financial. So if you see, let's say post-pandemic, a lot of people's social well-being would have been low, and it would have been good to do things that would have been boosting your social well-being to improve how you feel in general. But people weren't thinking like that, really. I spoke to a lot of people through the pandemic who were saving their money that they weren't using on those that obviously weren't impacted directly losing money, but there was a lot of people sitting at home, not spending money on traveling, not spending money on eating out, stuff like that. And they were putting their money away, but they were suffering. So I was saying to those people, think about, something that really lights you up, something that makes you feel good, and do spend on it. Spending we've never really as a society been saying, certainly from the finance industry has been very focused on saving. Saving is good, but spending is bad. But no, we have to spend to take care of ourselves. We have to. So there has to be a good balance between the two, between spending and saving. And the way we can optimize our spending, which is something that we're really passionate about, is to look at your happiness per pound and optimize that. I'm talking a lot, Tobias. I'm sure you've got some questions for me. I don't want to talk too much.
Yeah, it's been really, really interesting to hear your journey into that space. It resonates so deeply for me in terms of like money being not considered as a thing of like, oh yeah, that's a thing that makes me feel good. And it's all, at least sort of like in the circles that I'm in, sort of the more kind of personal development. It has a lot to do with your spiritual practices, and all these things make you feel good. But then I think money is a very grounded thing. And it's like, okay, like actually, like when money is sorted, there is stability. At least that's my personal experience. And when it's not sorted, then it creates stress. And when you were speaking about kind of like spending and saving, what really comes up for me is ultimately your work is about becoming investors in happiness. Like how am I investing my resources at a rate of return that improves my happiness with every single pound that I'm investing into things that make me light up. Now, in terms of money fitness, how do you describe that in your word? Like, what is it to you, and how can people think of how fit they are in money terms?
Well, if I start with two case studies, two people that have been through the kind of journey of what I call the ZavFit way. We're not here to talk about that, but it's certainly the way that I think about it and the way that we're trying to help other people. So my first case study was a lady who had suffered for 10 years with her physical health and was coming out that journey and feeling better and starting to face life again and she got a new job, which she was really excited about. During that time, she decided how, the areas that she wanted to help make, the areas that she knew would make her feel happy. And she'd found some opportunities doing that after she'd started to feel better. And money for her is not something that, I think what you said is if people haven't met that threshold of basic needs, then that is a cause of stress. But for those who have met the basic needs, those, on the triangle of basic needs that we have, which is really that food and water and shelter, as long as those basic needs are met, then anything above that, really, that kind of discretionary spend, if you like, we have to decide how to use that and how to optimize that for our happiness. So for this particular person, the basic needs were met, but then there was always a decision of, I can't afford this. So she looked to start, she said, I know I need to take care of my health in order to not end up back where I was. My health needs to remain a priority. But she said, I've never been able to afford a gym membership. And our argument was to her that actually, if you don't do that and you don't put your health first, then you're not going to be able to do the things that you enjoy. So anyway, the long story short is she has prioritized that spend, which for her, she would never have considered doing before. She'd have thought she couldn't afford it. But she's done that by saying, okay, instead of saying I can't afford this, I'll look at that amount of spend and then say, what am I spending that on otherwise? And that might have been, eating out a few times a week or whatever, but it wasn't thinking about things in the same way. It was, I can afford it. I can just cut back on other things that aren't giving me the same benefits. So she's doing that now. She's swimming, a few times a week. And whereas she thought that was something she couldn't afford, she's getting huge amounts, huge boost to her health and happiness. And then there's someone else, another case study that I have of someone that through the pandemic got financially hit very hard and mentally hit very hard as a result. And through it has has tried to encourage that person to try something new and try and discover things that completely occupy their mind and find that thing that would bring them real happiness and invest in that to help them, with their mental health coming out of it. So it's looking at where are the gaps in my well-being and really trying to address them and seeing with, and it's not very easy to do unless I guess you sit down and really think about it in all these different areas of well-being that I have, physical, mental, social, which ones do I need to focus on? And then try and look at your spending and say, so a lot of people are spending to try and fill up. When we spend because of an emotion, generally, because we're happy, because we're sad, because we're bored. But instead of doing spending in that way, spending with purpose, so spending deliberately to improve. So coffee gets a bad rap because there's a huge coffee culture. But for some people, buying a coffee might be the only time in the day that they see someone. And it might be a time for them to also catch up with a friend. Therefore, it's given them a boost to their social well-being. And if that is the case, then I would argue for that person, it's a good spend. But if you're just in the ritual of buying a coffee just because you're bored, or, if you're in the ritual of it just because it fills up time, or, you just want to get out, then perhaps you could do something else, like just go for a fresh air, walk around the block, or phone a friend, and you've cut back on that. And at the end of the week, perhaps you could spend the money that you saved on that coffee. So we try and challenge people to perhaps, the language is never save. The language is cut back on this, so that then you could afford to spend in the other area, which we know is going to really give you a huge boost in your well-being in some way. It's just a different way of thinking. And we try and help people to, encourage people to think about how they feel after they, before they spent, after they've spent. And that's what that's what you asked me, what is money fitness? It's a term that I've had to scale back because it doesn't mean anything to anyone yet. Ultimately, what we're starting with is the term happiness per pound. So when you're thinking about spending, think about what is my happiness for this spend? How is this spend contributing? So lots of people might be stressed out with the heating bills, but it's something we can't control right now. And if we can put that in a bucket of actually it's keeping my family warm, then there is a benefit to that. The same with shopping bills, which have gone up. There is a benefit in feeding your family. So they can't always be sad spends. They can be happy spends as well, because they're nourishing me and they're giving me, I love nothing more than cooking a good meal. And yes, the price might be £20 more than it was before, but at least I can still feed my family a good meal. So there's just ways of framing your thinking to try and reduce the stress that you feel around money. I don't know if that helps answer that question, Tobias.
Yeah, I feel it definitely does, especially the sort of like reframe that you did towards the end, where it's, if we see that all of these investments that we're making, or these spends that we're making, are actually coming back in meaningful ways to our life. And feel the verbiage around it is, I feel, really important. I mean, when I turn on the radio in the car, I mean, so many advertisements right now, it's like, oh, cost of living crisis, blah, blah, blah. And it's like so fear-driving, fear-mongering. And it's really beautiful to see, on the contrary, how, your work is going in that space where the context is the same. However, how you're speaking about it and how you're enabling people to see, like, look, yes, it may cost like £20 more, but you're still having an amazing experience with the family. You're feeding them good food, you're eating yourself good food, and potentially becoming even more mindful of, like, wow, how is this actually nourishing? And I feel in that sense, money really being sort of like a focus element of, like, wow, let's look, like, where am I receiving value in my life, and where is I want to come back to this emotion piece, because where are we sometimes just like spending money just to make ourselves feel better? Well, really what we would need to do is be like, okay, I'm feeling triggered, I'm feeling irritated, I'm feeling angry, whatever. And I just sit with this feeling rather than going out and buying something to, get distracted by sort of the shopping impulse. And
Yeah, exactly.
you made an important point there, spending with purpose. And I'd love to hear a bit more. How do you enable people to, yeah, at times step back from the emotion, and instead of making this impulse shop because you feel somebody has irritated you, to, wow, actually, I can digest this irritation and I'm saving these 50 pounds or whatever I would have invested into some random thing which I will never use, and then moving it into,
I
a more
found the
purposeful
secret
space.
to it. I think the secret to it, certainly from the case studies that I know so far, is actually identifying for yourself what makes you tick as a person. And that could be my ultimate, I feel at my happiest when I am with my family, or when I am with my children, or it could be when I'm having some time to myself doing X, Y, or Z. For me, when I do sport, I feel incredibly happy. This particular sport that I do makes me so happy, and it really boosts every time I do it. It completely boosts, takes my stress, takes everything I'm thinking about during the day away, lifts me. And the same for me with singing. If I go and sing, it's a huge outlet for me. It's an outlet for me that I've recognized is essential. I wasn't doing it for a while, and I've just found a way to do it again. And the benefits I feel are immense. So I really knew, because I did a lot of this as a child, and it made me very happy then. So I remembered that those things made me feel good then. So I think identifying for yourself, and I think a lot of people don't know what that is, and I think that's fine. But the key to finding it, if we can find it, then I think we'll cut back, we'll stop without even realizing it, we'll stop spending on things to try and fulfill those emotions. So whether that be a delivery takeaway, whether that be going to buy new clothes. I'm not saying that that's all bad, because I do genuinely think it's very individual for each person. But if you can sit down and say, I know this is what really makes me feel amazing. Really, this is the thing that I know I need to do each week, or each, and it can be just something tiny. It could be watching birds for five minutes a day, or something like that. It's going to be so different for everyone. And if you don't know what that is for you, I would encourage you to try and start to discover it. And it doesn't need to be something that costs a lot of money, and it really needs to be very unique to you. So there might be something in the back of your mind that thought, oh, I'd love it if I could do this, or I've always thought about doing this. My encouragement would be, take one step to trying something new if you don't know what that thing is for you. And then you'll discover, you don't know what passion is until you've started to really go on that discovery journey. And then if you can identify something that you would say, like I'm describing now, makes your eyes light up, makes you feel that it changes how you feel as a person. It might change your identity. I've had someone say that recently to me, this thing that they found, because they have found that for themselves, and I've encouraged them and helped them, is changed how they feel about themselves as a person, as a whole. And what it will do is really direct your spending. So anything outside of the daily, what we would call bills, and doesn't really maybe make us light up as a person, it would, outside of that, then investing in your happiness, as you said, Tobias. There's one question that comes at me quite often, but what about what about if you're in a family? What about if you've got a couple? And I'm in a couple, and my wife is spending all the money, or my husband's spending all the money. I get asked that a lot, and that causes a lot of stress for people. Relationships, it causes a lot of breakdown in relationships. And my answer is quite simple, actually, and that is that we're all very unique individuals. And what makes you happy is going to be very different to what makes your partner happy, and what makes your children happy. But if we can have some understanding for each other, so with my husband, I wanted him to discover what is that thing that makes you tick, what's that thing that really, and you've got to have something for yourself. It can't be that, his natural way was to go to work, work really hard, and then spend everything he earns on the family and on other, he was a provider, but his mental health was suffering. So I said, you've got to find that one thing for yourself, which he has now found, and it makes him so happy. So I do think that in relationships, if we can understand each other's needs, and find what's my thing, what's your thing. And then, so during the pandemic, my husband's a pilot, and we really suffered financially. So we had to sit down, get out a pen and paper, and say, what's the one thing that both of us must not give up on in order to maintain good mental health? Because that's something that I'm really focused on, and really focused on health and well-being, and mental health is a core part of that. So he had something that was very different to me, and we both understood each other's needs in that respect. In order for me to function and feel good, I need to be doing this, and the same for him. And then it will be the same for the children, trying to help them find that one thing. And it doesn't happen overnight. You have to help people discover it over time. And then once you get there, then it will really help to direct your spending, and hopefully reduce some of those more, spends that don't really have a lot of purpose, if you like.
Super resonates for me. I recently started Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and salsa, and it's just two of these things that make me feel so good. And I've been like toying with the idea of is it a good investment of my time and my resources, and I just the return on it is tremendous.
Huge.
And
it was the same for me. It was boxing.
For boxing, I think it's like having this physical outlet is definitely a big piece in feeling overall well, like body, mind, spirit. So for anyone
who's different for everyone, right?
Yeah,
it's different for everyone. Yeah. Everybody's going to be different. So I've got a friend who loves bird watching, and that mindful experience for him is the most important thing for him to focus on. I've got someone else who loves interior design and DIY, and they know that, I know that every time they do that, it lights them up. And so it's you can see it on someone's face, and when they found that thing, because it just makes them feel good. I think that is key. Yeah. So it feels like it goes off the topic, but it is important because it will stop you doing all those other spends that are pulling you in all these directions where you haven't really found your purpose, found your direction that you want to go in, so that if I focus on this and putting my time and resources in this, it's going to have a good return on investment, as you said.
Absolutely. So also I want to say, if any of you who are tuning in right now, Angela or Monica or Jose, if you have any questions, and put them in the chat, we'll get to them in the flow of the conversation as well. Because there's two other components that came up when you were speaking. On the one hand, just the subjectivity of the experience, and really that know thyself. And once you know what makes you tick, you're no longer investing on, or basically spending money to kind of suppress a feeling, but you're really investing into kind of the expansion of who you are. And then the other piece is like the relationship topic is really interesting. Because I think actually throughout the pandemic, I was working with a financial coach, and he was saying, as a couple, just bring all the finances together and create all these like different pots and budgeting and da-da-da. Just an interesting thing, interesting thought process that you have. Now, I'm curious to hear from you. How do you manage resources and specifically money in the family? Do you both have your own bank accounts? Do you have everything together? How do you create a system that fosters the love without basically creating debate and discussion,
So I'll be very open with you. Growing up, my father worried about money every day. And it's probably part of what's given me a passion for this, because it had a huge impact on me as a child. And I hated it. And I gave me a real impetus to earn my own money, so that I didn't cause him any additional worry. ironically, my husband is fairly similar. He worries a lot, and I think that's very reflective of a lot of society, because it's one of the leading causes of divorce is finances and money. So it is this thing that goes on behind closed doors, because we don't all talk about it in the open, but within our relationships, within our close relationships, it can become a huge point of tension. So the way that we deal with it is, I've always said to my husband, it needs to be completely open. So we need to talk about these things openly. So if there's things he's worrying about, then it's more a point of, if you've got a plan in your head that you want to do, let's not deal with it separately. Let's make sure we put it all on the table and problem solve it together. So there's no too big a problem to solve together. So I try and strip the emotion out of it, because to me, I have got hold of this, what I call the ZavFit way. I've got hold of this concept of money fitness, and I really believe in it. Also because I've been through some tough stuff. I refer to a difficult time of my life, and it's made me think very different about everything in general. I have a very much a seize the day mentality, and treat every day as very precious. So if I wasn't going to be here in a week, what decisions would I be making? So it's the reason I wanted to start this movement and start this, because it's, even though lots of people have said to me, it's very ambitious, trying to change the way people think about their money. But I think it's needed. I think back to, I don't know how many people on the call from the UK, but there was a film in my childhood which was called Mary Poppins, which had the bank manager in it, and two children were given some money from their father, and they were told they had to put it in the bank. Now, that is the whole of the finance industry. Very cynically, the finance industry needs money to make money. So very cynically, I don't think it's ironic that we have been taught saving is good, and nobody's really focused on the spending side, and so nobody's ever dealt with it as a health issue before. But it's the health side of money, the worrying about money is growing exponentially. And as you say, the headlines don't help people. So back to the question you asked about how do we do it within our house. So I try and strip the emotion away and say, let's deal with it as a real practical issue. And it is exactly what I described earlier. I want, everything that we do has to be kind of, we've got this much to deal with. What's the priority? So we're always saying, would you rather have this, or would you rather? Yesterday we had a conversation about the family holiday next year and Christmas. Two things that are coming up. Christmas is a huge spending time, and we always also, my husband wanted to think about taking the children away on holiday next year. We've got my eldest stepdaughter's will be leaving home, so he's getting all worried about that. I'm a stepmom, so it's slightly different emotions, stepmom versus being the biological parent, but it's a huge, it's a huge emotion for him. So that conversation was, let's prioritize how much we're going to put in one over the other. So it's always either or, but it's all based on what's going to give me the greatest benefit and greatest happiness per pound. And that's the same even down to going on date nights. It's how, not how to spend it so that we know that we're both enjoying ourselves to the, we have to be quite planned about it and think about it in advance. So it's just being more mindful, I think, of how, with the money that you've got, how are you using it? And it's very natural to me now. It's very natural to him. It's a conversation that we both have, knowing what makes us tick, knowing what's important to each other. Yeah, so it's a fairly simple, once you get hold of it and once you understand, and every time you go out to spend, you think, what's the purpose of this? What's it giving me from a health perspective? And if the answer is nothing, then you might be able to do something else to distract yourself. I've recognized for myself, most of my spending happens at the weekends because I don't have time during the week. So it's at that time that I then have to think, right, let's get organized with something else so that I don't just go out and spend,
It's really, really interesting. Because in some ways, what I'm hearing as well is that the clarity of continuously making these sort of like trade-offs. Where am I investing the energy for, like, or the money for an experience that lights me up versus where am I investing? Or at least in my case, I see like I had a period of my life where I was like buying things sort of like for the facade of it. And this is like raising social status and all this stuff, where basically I was investing my money in sort of vein of wanting to build a certain personality rather than actually investing my money for the sake of like having an awesome experience like in the moment.
Yeah.
And that's a big piece where you spoke about, if you're not here in a week, like, why is it important for you to start this movement? And I'd love for you to speak more about the movement. And after we met, I did a beta test for your app. And if you can speak a bit more about like the kind of practicalities, how do you see the movement growing, what people are in it, and how can people also become part of that movement, actually being good stewards of their money and having a freaking amazing, happy life.
So there's one more point that I think would be worth saying before I go into that, and remind me if I go off track, won't you, Tobias? But I do think it's as important for spending as it is for earning. So a lot of people have that Sunday night dread before they go to work on a Monday morning. And they'll say to you, well, I have to do it because I need the money. But I do think it's the same for earning. So there'll be a lot of people that are trying to keep on earning more and more and more. And the focus is on how much versus how they're using what they've got. So there is so many studies that have been done around how much we need for in order to maintain happiness. But I think if you're unhappy in a job and you think you need to do that job to earn the money, my advice and what I do for myself is that rather than settling for that, take one step to try and change that. Because if you're, there's no point being in a life which you don't enjoy. 5 days a week is your working life. Now, you can get your happiness outside of work, but you can also change. You can change that circumstance. So you don't have to be on that hamster wheel that for some people ends up, I've heard of stories where people have ended up ending their own lives because their jobs have been so wrong for them. So wrong. I'm a people person. I have to be interacting with people to be happy at work. If I was sat in a room on my own in front of a screen, it would be very detrimental to my health, very detrimental to me. So there are people that aren't necessarily enjoying their jobs and they don't recognize why. Well, one thing they could do is try and understand themselves better. And that's the same as like identifying what makes you tick, just something that lights you up. It's the same for your work. There is things you can do. You can do, so I can't afford not to earn, no, but you can take small, tiny steps to make a change and not just, whether it's doing a course and again, finding, that small bit of resource that you've got there to change the path that you're on, because ultimately you need to be, happiness is the key, isn't it? We have to be happy. So doing something just for the sake of doing it and thinking you can't change, I don't believe that, which is why I started the Money Fitness movement and why we wanted to do what we were doing with ZavFit, in order to make people ultimately be able to achieve their full potential. So to realize these are the things that make me feel good, and to discover for themselves, this is really where I need to, this is what I want to be, start thinking differently. And the way we do it is very practical in the tool to start off with. And you can start, without having access to it, you can start thinking this way for every purpose, not overboard, but maybe more so start thinking, I'm about to go out and spend. How do I feel before I'm spending? Am I bored? Am I angry? Am I sad? Am I happy? So reflect on your emotions before you spend, and then reflect on your spend after you have done it. you will often know that we've done something and we'll have buyer's remorse 24 hours later. But 48 hours later, a month later, you can work out with something, was that a good investment or not? I'll take dinners out, for example. It's a very, you know, we're often time poor, you know, Deliveroos, Ubers. You know, if you're able to afford that discretionary spend, great. You know, it might be a good time saver for you. But for people that maybe can't, and they therefore can't do other things, I would argue that, you know, one of my colleagues has decided his way of becoming money fit is to walk to the station instead of take his car. He cuts back on petrol, cuts back on parking, and improves his physical well-being. So he feels really good about that from a money fitness perspective. One of my key ones, I go to the airport all the time. I live in Scotland and I travel a lot for work. I really don't like spending on water. It's a very trivial one, but it's £2.50, £3 in the airport. And if you're going through the airport a couple of times a day, that really adds up. So I will always have a water bottle on me, always fill my water bottle up. And I'm saving all the time on that. You know, I don't like to use that word saving. I like to use the word, you know, choosing to cut back on things in order to be able to spend on something else, so that I can spend on something else that gives me more joy than a bottled water, which we know also contributes to the plastic issues that we have in the environment. So it's got a double benefit. You know, I feel really good about it. So it's actually helping how I feel about money in general. So that is something you can do. You could think about little changes that you can make that would not only help your happiness, but could help the environment as well. So taking different transportation choices, riding your bike, which will make you physically feel amazing, as long as you don't go without a helmet in a dangerous situation. So it could make you feel physically amazing. All sorts of different choices that we make every day, like the taxi. I've got a 15-year-old stepdaughter who has got addicted to taxis and she doesn't have an income. You know, it's trying to help her understand the things that she's missing out on, perhaps, that would make her feel good. You know, it's getting into those habits and understanding why you're doing things, and trying to change that. There's a study done by scientists that show buying a coffee for someone else versus buying a coffee for yourself gives you greater happiness benefits. So I know there are apps like the Vitality app, I think, allows you to donate your Cafe Nero that you would win for yourself to someone else. And that's such a nice thing to do, to be able to pass on to someone else. So little things like that. There's all sorts of things we can do. And that was what we call money fitness, is spending on things, you know, really thinking about money as a contributor to your health, because it's so core to how you feel happy, it's core to how you feel unhappy. And also another key point is understanding that we cannot always control everything. So money is one of those finite resources that we like to think we can control. But the last 2 years should have shown us we can't always control how much we have, but we can have some control over how we're using what we've got. So if we just say, well, the finite resources I've got, how am I going to use that? How am I using what I've got? And if it is this winter, if it is I'm heating my family and I'm doing a really good job of keeping that heating on, then you should feel good about that, because it's become more expensive. That's outside of your control. You know, shopping has become more expensive and you can have those lovely meals at home. And actually, I've discovered that eating out has become less rewarding because it's gone up in price, gone down in quality. So I'm seeing that differently. I'm not getting for my money what I used to get for my money, so I don't enjoy it as much. So therefore, I'd rather have my friends at home. But it's different for everybody. We'll get different happinesses out of different things. You know, going to, you know, if your passion is music, for example, I love music, and I found going to see live music inspires me, makes me feel good. So there are lots of different ways you can, you know, really make yourself feel good in all the different areas that are unique to you. and they will be unique to you. So for me, music. So if I go and see that, it will inspire me. For someone else, it could be something completely different, something to do with nature, something to do with animals, all sorts of different things. But if you know what that is for you, then you don't need to feel guilty about it. You know, it's stripping out that guilt. There's so much guilt associated with spending and with money. And how can you possibly afford that? You know, but in going back to the example I said at the beginning, on a Friday night in London, £100 in the pub, regardless of income, nobody would blink an eye. But if I told someone I was spending £100 on boxing a week, people would drop their drawers and say, how could you possibly afford that? But it's no different. It's just, I know one is giving me greater happiness. It's just how other people see it. So if you drop the guilt for yourself, you know, actually, I know that's a very good spend for me. So therefore, you know, I don't need to feel guilty about that. And you cut back on the one thing and you spend it on the other, knowing your quid's in. Yeah.
I think choice, that's the big piece that is coming out from everything that you're saying. And it's interesting as well in the world of design thinking. It's, look, the more constraints you have, the more creative you become. And what I'm really taking away from listening to you and hearing how you view money is really beautiful, because it's this thing of even cooking together, you know, cooking with your family. It could actually become this amazing moment of togetherness and building more intimacy and getting to know your kids from a different angle and really having the quality time that previously was not there. And so, like, yeah, in any misfortune, there is the equal and opposite fortune. And what I love from your explanation is really enabling and inspiring. Like, look, what makes you happy? You have all the resources that you need. Just go invest them in the ways that maximize your personal well-being. And from now, the personal angle, I want to shift slightly to, because you also spoke about earlier having a product for companies and effectively putting companies in a state of like responsibility to enable their employees to feel that sense of ease and well-being. So if you can just speak about that aspect for a little bit, would be super exciting.
Yeah, so a lot of companies now are looking and seeing that money stress is having an impact on the organization, because people are present at work, but they're very stressed about money and they're not able to talk about it. So one of the reasons companies haven't felt comfortable to talk about money, well, apart from the cultural issues around talking about money, is because they often are nervous that the conversation is going to be around salary and increasing salaries. And that isn't always possible. So it's not always possible to increase salaries, even if companies would like to. They can't always do that. So that's made them, you know, shy away from it, if you like. But actually, the conversations I have with companies is there is something you can do. You can deal with money as a health issue, which is what ultimately your employees have got an issue with. It's the stress that they're feeling about the money that you can address. And the way you can address it is by using, you know, there's two different data sets. You've got the well-being data set, so understanding the well-being of each individual or of your workforce. And then the finance side of it is the other side of it. And those two should be married together in order to come up with the right solution. It's not about how much have we got, it's how we're using what we've got and really helping people to think differently. So companies can provide them. So we have a tool that we provide companies that does this automatically, gives people an opportunity to reflect on their spending. And by doing that, so they might be able to recognize sooner than they otherwise would what's not making them feel good, and therefore addressing and stuff. So for me, you know, when I had that moment back in 2011, standing in the middle of the city thinking, why is there not more on offer for people to help people relax? We've got a real problem with it in London, where we turn to alcohol, and it isn't always healthy for people. I think, you know, I spoke to someone this week who said to me, if I'd have had your app, I would have realized sooner rather than later what wasn't making me feel good, because I would have had to reflect on. So companies can talk to people in a different way about money and have that conversation from a health perspective and really understand for each individual, especially if someone is really, so there'll be two types of individual. One that cares, is preventative, and they care about all the different aspects of their health already. So they're drinking lots of water, they're getting their 8 hours sleep a night, they're already exercising. Those types of people, they just need to know there's another aspect of your health. That is this money fitness thing. And here's how you can get yourself money fit, i.e. preventative. And then there's people who are already very stressed, worried about finances. And for those people, we can help them by trying to understand their well-being. So if we identify a gap in their well-being, so that might be physical for a lot of people, it might be mental, it might be social. Okay, so let's focus on that. The one that's really low, I know that we can use what you've got and optimize it to improve how you're feeling. Because ultimately, we know, we talk to a lot of people who say, my physical health, I know I need to do it, can't afford to do this, haven't got time to do that, but they can have a different type of conversation. So let's help you with that area. And then it's actually, they can make a difference to how that person is feeling. And the purpose of money, the ultimate is that we just need to be happy as individuals. We don't just need more money for the sake of buying more stuff and the sake of doing more things and the holidays and all of those things that we try and live up to. We just have to realize we can't always control the amount we have. Let's optimize and find the best ways for me and my family and how I'm using it. I know I feel like I'm saying the same message, but it's a real different way of thinking about spending. Because often people are out there spending.
Because I feel that the message that it's really coming through for me is that, it's the same message as like in the personal development world generally. Is like, ultimately like get to know who you are, like what makes you tick, like why are you here, like what's your purpose. But it's coming from a really interesting angle, from the angle of like finance, which to me in many ways has, as you also identified, has not really been looked at, and money is kind of a stressor, and okay, if I don't think about it, it doesn't exist. But really using it as like, wow, this is one of my tools in the toolkits of like living an expansive life. And I feel it has a lot to do with like self-love and self-compassion. So when I'm hearing you speak, it's just beautiful to see like, wow, let's use money as this portal into getting to know myself more, seeing what makes me more happy. Also recognizing that there may be sadness of like, okay, in this moment I can't have both things. I need to choose one or the other, because whatever resources aren't like overflowing. But then it really builds that strength of character, what I'm recognizing, to be a person that can make a choice rather than like, I'll do both, but ultimately you're not present in either one of them.
Yeah, exactly. And we don't always need, it's trying to pinpoint why we need the things we think we need, because we'll get stressed if we can't. Holidays is one of those things. We really do need breaks. We know that from a well-being perspective, it's very important to take a break. And I think it's working out for ourselves what that actually means. What, does that, because a lot of the time you'll take yourself on holiday anyway. So, it's really a break in your mind and how you can fulfill that. So it's just always challenging yourself as to, why do I think I need those things that I'm getting very stressed over, not being able to have that second car, or, that fifth holiday, or, I'm talking about complete extremes, but there are, there's a lot of situations I hear people very stressed with money, and they're high earners. There was an article out in the Telegraph not that long ago about the majority of money stress is people that are earning over £80,000 a year. And that's possibly because they're thinking that they need to have this and they need to have that. But if they could challenge themselves on what they really do, what really is making them feel good, and what's going to make them, them and their families happy, they could probably strip it back And I'm not saying we deprive ourselves of everything good at all, but sometimes we do. If we have to have a choice, and it just is a good barometer for that choice making. You know, actually, my family holiday is the most important thing for me. So therefore, I'm going to cut back. We're going to have some slightly smaller, you know, Christmas treats. We're going to have some, but we know that come the summer, we're going to have that lovely 2-week holiday that we're all going to look forward to. And you know, there's nothing wrong. You know, one thing that I think is important is not judging spending, and that's something that we all do, is judge how other people spend. But that's wrong. I really don't believe we should ever do that, because we don't know that individual's circumstance, we don't know that individual's well-being needs, and it's very different. What's right for one person is not what's right for another person, and we should be more accepting of that. And what society should try to do is constantly pull us and tell us all, this is what you should be spending on. This is the things we all need. And it's really hard to actually stand out and be unique. But if we all start doing it and all start thinking differently, then it would make that stress and that guilt reduce for people.
Yeah, it's really interesting, because over the last few years, I really found money being a tool for focus. And I really enjoy actually times when there's like low bank balances, because it makes me focus on like what matters to me. And yeah, that's why I've been really excited to have this conversation, because it's, just seeing it from a different perspective rather than like listening to all the ads. It's being like, look, this is like the resource that I have, and let me be creative in creating the life that I want rather than the life that I'm told to live. And
I ultimately believe we can turn around our health with our money. I really believe that, because I've done that for myself. And so if you've got a health issue, whether that's, you know, your mental health, your physical health, I believe you can turn that around by focusing your spend, because I've done that myself and I've helped other people do that. But that's a long way. That's getting people here. The very first start is actually thinking about your emotion when you're spending and why you're doing it. So it's a journey. You know, I've been doing this for a long time and talking about it for a long time, and I'm really passionate about it. And whenever I talk to people, it helps them understand things in a different way. But it takes time to change the way you think. And I love challenging myself as well, finding ways to cut, because building a business as I have, it really focuses the mind. You know, I haven't had the same amount of money that I used to have. So I see it actually as a challenge sometimes, saving money on this and that. And some people are going, well, why are you worried about water bottles? Well, for me, it's quite a big spend of something that's giving me zero benefit, because I can get water from a tap. You know, in an airport, all airports have got water things. Most streets now have got somewhere you can get water from. There's no reason we need to do it. We don't need to get plastic bags and pay for them. There's all these things, you know, now in place. You know, we can take our coffee cup and get money off our coffee for taking our coffee cup. I love those challenges. Some people would be embarrassed to do them, but I enjoy the challenge.
It's really beautiful. Yeah, this we're coming to the end. So I left all your links for anyone who wants to connect more with like Anna and the ZavFit movement. So there's all the links in the description of the episode. But are there any things that you want to leave us with, Anna? Some final words of wisdom, or how people can, be part of one of these cool challenges that you're doing for yourself and maybe for others as well?
I think my final words would just be, if you're stressed about money, just think about, first of all, if you haven't discovered something for yourself that really makes you, makes you tick, makes you light up, try something new and try and discover something that makes you feel really passionate, because it will help you to identify where you should be directing your spending from and it will stop you worrying about spending on other things. It really will. So if you haven't found that thing for yourself, that would be my ultimate piece of advice, would be to start, trying new stuff, discovering stuff. And then that will really help with the stress ultimately. And then have conversations with your partner about doing the same thing for them. Let's find that one thing, especially if every day feels like a grind and you don't have any joy in your life. because that's the most important thing, is that, you know, every day has to be enjoyed, every day has to be optimized. We're not always going to be happy, that's not realistic, but at least if we can try and do things proactively to look after and take care of our mental health and well-being, then that's the, you know, ultimately, you know, health is wealth.
Love that.
Words.
Amazing. Anna, thank you so much for being here and sharing your enthusiasm. Thanks for everyone who joined us live.
I hope. Oh.
Yeah, so please say, what did you want to say?
Oh, I was just said, I very much hope that it's been useful to those that are listening.
I have taken like tons of notes myself, and your experience resonates super, super deeply. Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you, Tobias. Thank you for having the conversation.
Amazing. Much love.
Take care.